In this video, we will give you an overview of Holy Week. But what is Holy Week? Well, my son likes to call his socks that have holes in it holy socks. But that's not the word holy we mean. The word holy means connected to God. Now you may know that when we talk about the Bible, sometimes we use the phrase Holy Bible, because the Bible is all about God. So the Bible is connected to God. Holy Week refers to the last week of Jesus' life. Christians believe that Jesus was the Son of God who came into the world to help people to be friends or to be connected with God again. They believe that Jesus came to earth to restore the broken relationship between God and people and to bring forgiveness. Holy Week starts with a day we now call Palm Sunday, when Jesus arrived in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover feast.
Jesus and his disciples were on their way to Jerusalem when they came to the Mount of Olives. Jesus sent 2 of his disciples to a village nearby. Go to the village, and as soon as you get there, you will find a donkey tied up. Untie it and bring it back here. And if someone asks you why you are doing that, say that the master needs it, and will send it back at once. So they went and found the donkey out in the street, tied to the door of a house. As they were untying it, some of the people nearby asked what they were doing. They answered just as Jesus had told them to, and the crowd let them go. They brought the donkey to Jesus, threw their cloaks over the animal, and Jesus got on. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The whole crowd began to shout, "Praise God! God bless him who comes in the name of the Lord. God bless the coming kingdom of King David, our father. Praise be to God."
When Jesus arrived in Jerusalem, the first thing he did was visit the temple. But when he got there, he saw something that made him very sad. There were poor people who had come a long way to worship God. They had doves with them, the very best that they could find, and they wanted to give them to God as a way of saying thank you for his love. But the men who worked at the temple would not let them do that. "We're very sorry," they said, "but the doves you have brought are not good enough for God. You have to buy these special temple doves." And they pointed to a bench that was covered with cages. The poor people set down their own doves and fumbled around for what few coins they could find. "We're very sorry," said the temple workers once again. "We don't take ordinary coins here. You have to use special temple money to buy the special temple doves." And they pointed to a table that was covered with coins. So the poor people sighed and changed their money. But for every 2 coins they gave, they only got 1 coin back. "You've cheated us," they cried. And the temple workers just grinned. "We're very sorry," they said for the 3rd time, "but those are the rules. Now stop your moaning and get on with your business." Jesus was no longer sad. No, Jesus was angry now. In fact, he was furious. These poor people had simply come to worship God, and they were being cheated every which way they turned. So Jesus did something that no one had expected, something that no one had ever done before. Jesus turned over the tables of the money changers. He knocked down the benches full of doves. And as the coins clattered on the floor and the birds flew free from their cages, Jesus cried, "God's temple should be a place of prayer, but you have made it a hideout for cheats and thieves." The poor people cheered when they heard what Jesus said, but the money changers and the bird sellers and all the other cheats were really angry. And so were the religious leaders who had been watching all along. "We need to do something about this man," they grumbled. We need to stop him now. And that was just the beginning of Jesus' troubles.
The religious leaders were angry with Jesus. They were jealous of him too. If the people listen to him, they moaned, they may not do what we tell them anymore. We won't be nearly so powerful and important. So they decided to test Jesus, to ask him hard questions in the hope that he would give the wrong answers and that the people would stop listening to him. I've got a good question, said one of the religious leaders. The people hate the Romans because the Romans rule our country and treat us so badly. Let's ask Jesus if he thinks it's right to pay taxes to the Roman leader, Caesar. Brilliant, said another religious leader. The people will not like it if Jesus says that it is all right to pay taxes to Caesar. They believe that God is our king and that we should honor only him. But if Jesus says that we should not pay our taxes, then we can tell the Romans and get him into big trouble. Either way, we win. So the next day, while Jesus was talking to the crowds, the religious leaders asked him the question, is it all right to pay taxes to Caesar? Jesus looked at the religious leaders. He guessed that they were trying to trap him. So he asked a question of his own. Can somebody give me a coin? He said. And when he was handed a little silver one, he held it out and asked another question. Whose face is on the coin? The religious leaders were puzzled. Caesar's face, they said. Jesus just smiled. All right then, he answered. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And the crowd booed. But Jesus went on. Give to God what belongs to God. And the crowd, they cheered. But the religious leaders just walked away. Jesus had given good answers. He'd passed their test and they had to admit it. So now they were more angry than ever. The religious leaders were angry with Jesus and they made a plan to kill him. But they needed help. They didn't have to wait long because one of Jesus' 12 disciples, named Judas Iscariot, went to them and asked, "What will you give me if I help you to arrest him?" And they offered Judas 30 silver coins. The deal was done.
It was time for the Passover meal, and Jesus and his friends were celebrating it together. During the meal, Jesus became very serious, and he said that one of his friends who was sharing the meal with him was going to betray him. The disciples began to argue that they certainly wouldn't do anything like that, but one of them had already decided in his heart to betray Jesus. Some of the religious leaders of the time didn't like Jesus. Some were jealous of him, some thought that he was a troublemaker, and some thought that what he was teaching was wrong. And so they had begun plotting to kill Jesus, but they needed someone close to Jesus to help them. For 30 pieces of silver, Judas had agreed to help by leading them to Jesus. He was the one Jesus was talking about. Soon after Jesus had made his claim, Judas got up and left, leaving the others to finish their meal. While they were still eating, Jesus took a piece of bread, said a prayer of thanks, broke it and gave it to his disciples. He told them that the bread was his body. In the same way that the bread had been broken, so soon his body would be broken and battered. Then he took a cup of wine, gave thanks to God, and handed it to them, and they all drank from it. This is my blood which is poured out for many, my blood which seals God's promise and shows his love to all people. After this, Jesus said that trouble was coming soon, and that all his friends would run away and leave him. Even one of his best friends, Peter, would say that he didn't know Jesus. By now the disciples were getting quite upset, and Peter promised he would never do that. Jesus and the others then left and went to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus went to pray. Whilst they were there, a great crowd of people armed with swords and clubs came into the garden. At the front of the crowd was Judas, and he went up to Jesus and kissed him. This was to show the guards which one Jesus was. Straight away the guards came up and arrested him. Jesus' friends were scared and ran off, just as Jesus had said they would. Jesus was taken to the high priest's house, where all the leaders were waiting. Jesus' trial had begun. At every Passover festival, Pilate was in the habit of setting free any one prisoner the people asked for. At that time, a man named Barabbas was in prison for murder. Pilate asked the crowd who had gathered to choose between Barabbas and Jesus. The chief priests stirred up the crowd to ask Pilate to set Barabbas free for them. Pilate asked the crowd what should happen to Jesus, and they replied that he should be crucified. Pilate wanted to please the crowd, so he set Barabbas free for them. Then he had Jesus whipped and handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers who were in charge made fun of Jesus and even beat him up. They then, making him carry his own cross, led Jesus to the place called Golgotha, where he was to die. They crucified Jesus with 2 thieves, one on either side of him. At noon, the whole country was covered with darkness, which lasted for 3 hours. At 3 o'clock, with a loud cry, Jesus died. The curtain hanging in the temple was torn in 2, from top to bottom. The army officer who was standing there in front of the cross saw how Jesus had died. "This man really was the Son of God," he said. Some women, including Mary, were there, and they stood looking on from a distance. That evening a man called Joseph of Arimathea arrived. He was a follower of Jesus. Joseph went boldly in to see Pilate and asked him for the body of Jesus. Pilate agreed. Joseph brought a linen sheet, took the body down, wrapped it in the sheet, and placed it in a tomb that had been dug out of solid rock. Then he rolled a large stone across the entrance to the tomb. The women were watching and saw where the body of Jesus was placed.
Saturday was the Sabbath, the Jewish day of rest. Jesus' followers mourned his death. All their hopes and dreams were shattered. But something amazing, something wonderful was about to take place.
Very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb where Jesus had been placed. They found the stone rolled away from the entrance to the tomb. So they went in, but they did not find Jesus' body. They stood there puzzled about this, when suddenly 2 men in bright shining clothes stood by them. Full of fear, the women bowed down to the ground as the men said to them, "Why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? He is not here. He has been raised. Remember what he said to you while he was in Galilee. The Son of Man must be handed over to sinners, be crucified, and 3 days later rise to life." Then the woman remembered his words and decided to go back to where the disciples were staying. Suddenly, Jesus met them and said, "Peace be with you." They came up to him, took hold of his feet, and worshipped him. "Do not be afraid," Jesus said to them. "Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." And this is exactly what they did. Jesus later appeared to the disciples and many other different people before he went back to heaven. Jesus, who was dead and buried, was now alive. He had been resurrected.
Christians celebrate Easter to remember that Jesus gave his life on the cross and came back to life again. They believe that Jesus was God's Son, who died on the cross to forgive them for all the wrong things they say, the wrong things they think, and the wrong things they do. And because Jesus came back to life again, they believe that they will also have life with God in heaven forever. Easter is a celebration of new life.